Okay, then. Shall we go ahead and look at getting started? So, today we're going to be covering rebuilding Rails, and we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 7, which is going to be covering ORMs, how we might work with SQLite 3, and kind of getting into some details around there. Now, quick housekeeping items before we get too much into this. I am going to be out next week to be at RubyConf Mini. If you happen to be in town, please do say hi. But otherwise, we will not be covering Chapter 8 next week. I'll be posting an announcement about this. And we will likely be covering the last two chapters here fairly quickly. And I will be evaluating what we're going to want to do as far as holiday timing and likely try and vote on which book to cover next, likely starting back in January. Okay, so with all of that said, let's go and take a look at some code and start playing with this. So the book starts out and says we have a good MVC framework, but we don't actually have a model. We made a file-based model, and most actual web frameworks are going to be using something far more along the lines of an ORM or something which is working on top of SQL, Postgres, or insert your favorite database here. So what we're going to be doing is using SQLite 3, which amusingly and perhaps ironically is a file-based data store, I believe. Don't quote me on this. But it requires substantially less storage. Well, no, substantially less time to set up than maybe MySQL or Postgres or anything else like that. So it's very useful for just quick, let's get into something, play around and experiment. Okay. So the book starts out, and we're on page about 95 here, saying other ORMs like SQL, Data Mapper, Active Record, and some others support inheritance, which allows you to make your own models, which is far more useful. And that's what I believe we're going to be looking at today. Now, the book does caveat that we're not going to do full-on migrations, and this is a little bit of a longer chapter, so we will be together quite a bit today. Hence the extra coffee. Okay. So one of the questions you might have, and the book covers this, is without migrations, how exactly do we create tables or do anything like that? Well, by manually going in and running SQL. So yes, we are going to learn a little bit of SQL here. So we're going to go ahead and add SQLite 3 here to the gem file, well, gem spec rather, of rulers. So we'll go ahead and hop in here. Clone that. Save that. Make sure that installs correctly. Otherwise, we'll have a little bit of fun debugging. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have that, and then we have that through there. So we are good to go on that. Yep, and like I thought, so SQLite stores its database in local files, but allows access for multiple processes and otherwise acts like a full database. Yep, and that's what we're looking for. So let's go to best quotes and then minimigration.rb. So we'll go ahead and minimize rulers here, just so we don't have too many things open. Require SQLite 3 here. Connection is equal to. This is on page 96 and 97. we'll go ahead and put our SQL in here. Now, the book uses lowercase. I'm probably going to capitalize keywords for SQL. You don't need to because SQL is case insensitive on this, but habit for me so I can tell the difference easily. So we're going to start out with create table, my table, and then inside of here we are going to have ID integer, which is a primary key, and I'll explain what some of these terms mean in one moment. Okay, let's see if this works real quick. Go over into best quotes, run this, and see if anything fails. Okay, so we have testdb, and you might notice that it showed up right over here. Because that's a binary file, we can't really do too much with that. So let's take a look into what this is and what exactly we're doing here. So first off, we have an ID. So the question is, how do you identify each quote? And you want to have a unique identifier, generally one that is automatically incremented from the database. There are ways to do this. We won't get into that too much. One thing is, if you are actually using this for making a real application, I would not use integer here, because integer, I believe, let's see here. Take a look at this. Was it 32 or 16-bit? I can't remember. Aha. So if you've ever seen this 2.14 billion thing, I mean, if you used to play games like, say, MapleStory Forever back in the day, you notice there was a 2.14 billion or so limit on your currency. You might have noticed some social networks which started that had likes with an integer primary key also crashed as soon as you went over 2.14 billion. That's primarily why. And why a lot of people are going to use, say, int a, big int, or something like that, because that goes from 2.14 billion to... Anyway, that's a large number, and I'm not going to try and figure out what exactly it is. But sufficient to say, do be careful if you do want to use this for real-time things. Okay. Posted is an integer. I'm going to have to find out what they're doing there. Varchar is saying variable character length of 30. So you can have a title that is up to 30 characters long. And then a body, which can be up to 32,000 characters long. Okay. So let's go over here. Then we'll probably add the to the get ignore. Do I not have one in here? Get ignore, okay. We'll go ahead and put that there. Don't need that anymore. Okay. So going back over to rulers, we're going to want something to actually model around this. Let's go to rulers, lib, rulers, SQLite model. It's a new file over here. Okay. We'll copy this initial little bit right here. Put that there. Okay, let's see what they got in here. Model. Silly me. close that real quick while we're thinking about it. Getting the schema. Info table, do row, and I will be explaining this in. Of course, as with any of these, feel free to stop for questions if you have anything which isn't immediately clear. I will be going over these in a little bit of detail after we finish typing though. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else in here. So what we're starting out with is a table and a schema. So where name comes from, I'm going to have to figure that out here in a second. Let's see here. So what we're going to be doing is getting the table info of this table which is going to go back up to this method, and then each row in that is going to take the name of that as well as the type of that to form a schema. So this might be something like if we go back over to mini migration, you get ID incher, posted incher, title varchar, body varchar, I believe. We'll probably see the actual output of this here in a second. Yep, and the book mentions that we don't currently have a method for table names, so we'll be looking at that in a second as well. Let's see here. So it looks like we're going to be taking a look into playing with IRB, and we're on page about 98 right now. Okay, best quotes, SQLite tests. So let's go ahead and make a new file. So let's go ahead and save that. And see what we get here. Yep, and that's about what we expected. So we'll go ahead and copy that output over to here, just so we have that. Okay, got that, and we'll put this here. Just so we have a reference to that for later. And the book does mention if you have an empty hash here, then make sure that you've actually run the mini migration over here. Then the book also mentions we can do bundle exec irb-r rulers, which will start us in that. So the Rubik cup thing here is probably because I have an IRB-RC, which I need to play with. I won't really mess with that too much. sometimes PDFs have such weird line breaking behavior. So that means we have that. We could potentially just take a look at the schema. Okay, and then the book mentions if we wanted to, we could turn this into something like a Rails console if we really wanted to. Let's see here, I wonder. So one thing to remember about a lot of these type of applications is if you have a gem, they typically have a bin/console. And anything you happen to do up here will actually be very relevant. So you could include a lot of code up here, hot load the models, give some debugging information, define additional methods, helpers, utilities, other things like that. So this might be very useful for you. Okay, let's see here. Actually, copy, paste. Okay, so require rulers. If we wanted to, we could copy this entire thing into here. Do something around the right. Chmod plus X. Last thing we happen to do. Okay. Anyway, we won't worry too much about that. If we do have some bonus time, we can take a look at that, but for now, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay, so adding a schema and some data. So rulers lib, rulers, SQL model. SQLite model, my apologies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deviate a little bit. And this is page 99 and page 100. I'm just going to wrap these in a class self. That way we're aware of what exactly is in here. So let's take those two off. That hash is equal to data, and let's see here. We're going to want to have, don't need that and don't need that. To SQL. When no class and null. When numeric value to string. When this, we want to wrap it in quotes. else we're going to raise an error on that. Okay, so what this particular method is doing is coercing a value into an SQL representation. So SQL doesn't know about nil. It does know about null, though. So we're playing a little bit with this, and there are a few other more complicated things we could be doing here, but again, this is kind of a very basic version of it. Okay, and then create, I'm assuming, is going to be something about creating. So let's see what we got in here. So deleting the ID from this is going to remove that key from the hash. I'm just going to save that in an underscored variable. So underscore prefixing something typically means that it's not actually used. For me, I just want to have that in there for the sake of interest. So keys would be schema keys minus ID. One day I'll be consistent with quotes. Today's not that day. So let's save that so far. I don't quite like the overlap of values and vals here, but anyway, we can play with that later. So we have values key. Just out of habit, we'll use constant here. Okay, so value would be to SQL value if it happens to exist, otherwise null. So we have those. Okay. So one thing as a reminder is that the book is actually doing this without the squiggly, and it also has all of the text because this over here kind of like this, which makes it much harder to read for me. That's why I use squiggly, which is chomp off all the least amount of leftmost indentation. So if I had something here, it would chop off all of this over to the left of that. Anyway. And I will bring something up about what we're doing here in the SQL in a second. But we'll leave that alone for the moment, and only for the moment. Okay, so we have that. Oh, right, our have else.join. So with SQL, one thing to keep in mind here is that you do not want to literally interpolate things in here, because if someone manages to get something into there, you're going to have what's called an SQL injection. Now, that said, I'm not going to quite cover too much into that, and I'm not sure if SQLite has what's called prepared statements, which make this a little bit easier to work with. They probably do, but let's see here. Okay, so we can actually prepare those things. Well, that might be an enhancement we get into in a second. But as a general rule, do not put literal values into SQL, because this could be a very big attack vector. Raw vals is equal to. So there are a couple ways we could do this. This is on page 100. So one fun thing about a hash is if you see a pattern like this, hash is actually coercible to a proc, so you could just do at values instead. Values to hash. So the old version of this was random screenshot. Don't need that. So if you've been around in Ruby for a little bit, you might have seen this before, which is the older version. That said, we now have the 2h method, which I think is clear, so that's why I'm using that. Okay. Okay, so last insert row ID, I'm assuming is a function which gets the last inserted ID from row, since this is going to be auto incrementing. Then db execute SQL here. I'm not sure what exactly that gives back, so I'd have to look into it, but the book probably goes into the bed in a second. Actually, tell you what, let's go ahead and get into that prepared statement thing, because that is potentially not great. db prepare. So prepared request is equal to db prepare that. And then let's see here. So we're binding table. Keys.join that. Balance.join that. Executing the request. So instead of this, we're going to be replacing these with question marks. And the reason we're doing this is because this will sanitize SQL. That way we don't have an attack vector there. let's make sure that I have that right. Yep. So that looks about right. We'll see if that works as I expect it to. Then this 0, 0, we'll have to see what that's doing here in a second. For now, let's leave that alone. It's probably a nice way to do that, but anyway, let's go ahead and just go along with the book. Okay, so we have that. So this is one of the reasons why Ruby is very, very pesky to work with sometimes, is because of stuff like this. Honestly, let's say results is equal to this and put that in there, and then we can do result 0, 0 instead. This is on page 101. Okay. Let's go ahead and make that a prepared request instead. Find the table. Execute it, and now we don't actually need that result variable anymore, so we can put that there. Okay, so I think that gets those. Yeah, I suppose that is redundant. Okay. So the book mentions the reason why we're playing with the primary key here and taking this out of the schema and out of that is because the auto increment that we had, if we go back over here, integer primary key is going to cause SQLite 3 to auto increment things, which useful. That way we don't need to bother with it ourselves. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Then a few bits about here docs on Ruby. Let's not bother too much with that. Let's see here. Change the test program to create some new rows and show us how many rows are in the database. So this will be in best quotes SQLite test over here. Okay, so we have that. We have our warming. Interestingly, this one switched from warn to standard error dot puts. I'm going to leave warn there just for now. Let's go ahead and copy this directly over here. I'm going to use parens just so I can tell what's going on there. Okay, let's see here. What was that SQLite test? Let's see what we got here. Initialize near question syntax error. Okay, so that's probably the prepared statement if I had to guess. And that would be on 152, 49. Yep. So, okay, so it doesn't like the prepared statements. I mean, we might remove those for sake of expediency here in a second, but let's see what we got here. Ruby SQLite 3, okay. Actually, which version of that gem are we running? Let's take a look real quick. That is SQLite 3. And we go to gemfile.lock. What are we getting here? SQLite 3, 153. I'm guessing this is a completely different gem, so we'll leave that alone. Okay. Is that the same one? I mean, it probably is. Okay, yeah, it is. Let's go ahead and make that bigger. That way we can see what's going on here. Okay. Okay, so now they're not even using. Yeah, they're just using Rails directly afterwards. Okay. Let's go ahead and pull the SQL out of here, put that there. Put the SQL in there, grab these three over here. Yoink. Okay. Don't need you anymore. Don't need you, don't need you. No, that's horrendous. Please don't do that. Hanging indent is the worst. No, stop trying to correct me. Okay, you get to go on one line then. Okay, so we have that. Let's see where it fails now. Okay, is that still around line 49, line 53? I mean, worst case, we're just going to put it back as it was. Near question mark. Response is equal to that. Now we'd only need response this. I don't think that's it, but let's see here. SQLite test 16, SQLite model row 50, line 53. Okay. This is why I should not play with things. Okay. have any additional docs on here? No, not really. Well, I guess let's try and put the count up right above it, just so we have that. Let's see if this works. Okay, so now that one's mad. Okay. Good, good, good. Syntax error. Let's try that, see if that works. Okay, it still doesn't like it. It might be we give up on prepared statements here. That is quite something. Okay, well, let's say that we put this literally in here again. Just to make sure this even works. Okay, so just hates prepared statements. Well, that's fun. Well, anyway, we can take a look at prepared statements sometime later as a bonus item then. In the meantime, let's get this working and we will move on from here. Got that. Put those there, that there, and see if that works. Yep. 2402, okay. So that does work. Yeah, I don't know why exactly it doesn't like prepared statements. Is it just a table name or something else? But anyway, we can worry about that later. As for this, though, raw values will be equal to keys.map values. SQL values will be equal to actually, no, let's leave that alone. And double check what the code there was. Yeah, let's go ahead and play with it a little bit. SQL values is equal to that, so we don't need to worry about that anymore. Let's say SQL values goes into here. Okay, so that still works. Just for sake of my curiosity though, let's take a look at this. Just to see what exactly that gives us back. Oh, weird. Okay, so it's just doubly nested. That's not as exciting as I thought it might be. Okay, back it goes. Now then, let's go ahead and look at the find method it was mentioning. Rulers model find. Let's go ahead and minimize create here. That way that's not taking up too much space. Find ID. And again, because I can't figure out what prepared statements want in SQLite 3 here, we're just going to use literal interpolation, noting that it's potential security risk, so don't do this in the wild. Schema keys join that from the table. Where the ID happens to equal the ID. Now, what I mean by that is something like you could say, well, no, let's not worry about SQL injections for right now. But anyway, so we have the row, good. You know what? Let's just make ourselves a keys method real quick. Okay, so we got that. We're going to go back up here to make ourselves an array-like accessor. We have that. Let's take a look at the test script thereafter here. Let's try running this again. Implicit conversion of string into integer on line 16. What did I manage to do there? Hash is equal to data. Okay. Okay. So it looks like something is giving that. Did I forget a 2H somewhere? I forgot 2H somewhere. Yes! Okay, line 74. That would do it. Okay. So that gets all that. Let's add a colon. That way it's clear what they're doing there. Maybe some quotes around here. And let's add the ID to that, just so we have that. And let's also get rid of that little data output thing that I put in here. Where is that? There it is. Okay, so I don't need you anymore. And let's see what we got. Found title 1 through 16. Okay. Got all those. Okay, so we're also going to get ourselves a save method. Okay. So we'll go ahead and grab this. Update self-class table, set fields, where ID happens to be equal to hash ID. Got that. And to be clear, I know why we're doing the interpolation and everything, but I do want to mention very, very, very frequently that this is vulnerable to potential security attack if we happen to do that. Okay, so that's probably smart. You don't want to automatically rescue everything because otherwise you get some weird errors there. Probably we'd want to make this more specific, but we won't get into that too much. Okay. So it looks like we're going to be adding another little test over here. I'm going to wrap that, put that there, got that. That we can save that, clear that, and okay. So it looks like we got a lot of those things done, and it looks like we're currently at the review segment of this. So there are a lot of things we could potentially do with this. That said, we're probably going to leave a lot of it alone for right now just because this is already a fairly long class. I'm going to take a look more into prepared statements for SQLite 3 and see what exactly it is I'm missing on here because there's probably something that's fairly basic that I'm not getting quite yet. Let's see here. Yep, but I think that's all we have for right now. If anyone has any questions, we can take a look at a few things. Otherwise, we can call it there. Okay. Well, that all said, thank you so much for coming out today and have a lovely weekend. I'll catch you around in a few weeks. Catch you later.